My name is Eva Valkovičová and I work in the Evaluation Directorate of the European Chemicals Agency. The roleplay you are about to watch will illustrate a few typical situations that you may encounter during the data gathering process for your registration. In 6 scenes, we try to simplify the main steps that the company may need to take to gather and analyze the data on their substances needed for registration. Before starting, there are some ideas I would like to share with you. Companies registering the same substance must work together to share and compile information on the uses, hazards and risks of their substances in order to demonstrate their safe use. By being well organized, you can achieve the goal to register chemical substances at the latest by 31st May 2018. There are 5 key activities of your preparations for registration. You need to understand your information requirements, gather hazard data, work together in the Substance Information Exchange Forum, so-called SIF, to fill data gaps and agree on classification and labeling. Then you need to gather information on the uses of your substances and assess the risks and the risk management measures you have in place. If new data needs to be generated, alternatives to animal testing must always be considered first. I have invited some of my colleagues who will be representing the following roles: Company Director, Company REACH Coordinator, National Help Desk, REACH Consultant. In this roleplay, the Company Director and the Company REACH Coordinator agree on the best strategy to register in time 2 substances that they have identified as subject to the REACH 2018 registration deadline. Let's start.
Good morning. Yesterday I watched ECHA's 11 Stakeholders Day and I realized that we should start preparing for the registration. I really don't want to miss the deadline in 2018. What are the steps that we have to take?
Morning, boss. You see, that's exactly what I tried to tell you about half a year ago, that we have to start working on it. And in the meantime, I already started spending some time when I had some spare time of mine, and have managed to find the list of pre-registered substances from 2008. And I'm hoping that it's still a complete list for us. And also mark those substances that we will definitely have to register together with the tonnage bands we will register them for, and have started to collect the data what we have on them in-house.
Okay, but ECHA says it only takes 6 steps to make it.
That is correct. It's only 6 steps, and they have already presented 3 of those. And I've watched all the webinars, so I'm more or less in picture of those. And essentially what we have to do is we have to make sure that we know exactly the substance identity for our substances. We have to find our co-registrants, those who are also registering the same substance, and we'll have to agree on data sharing with them and also on who's going to take the role of the lead registrant.
Okay, what about the money? How much is it going to cost?
That's a very good question, which seems to be what everyone's asking around, and no one seems to have a definite answer on it, because it very much depends on a lot of different factors. And also importantly, I don't think I'm going to be able to do all the work on my own, as at some point it becomes quite scientific. And I was looking at ECHA's website. They have a lot of information on it, but I'm not so sure where to start.
What about their help desk? I understand ECHA has a help desk that could provide some information.
They do indeed, but I think we have to start with our national help desk.
Well, all right, let's do that then.
Getting organized for REACH 2018 registration needs to be a priority in your company. If you have followed the roadmap phase by phase until now, you have already gone through the preceding steps and you have already made a list of substances you need to register. You checked if they are already registered by someone, you know who the other registrants for your substances are, and whether there is a lead registrant. Your tonnage band is clear and you are aware of what information you need to submit. If you have not started yet, you should do so now, as it takes time to collect all necessary information. You also need to reserve time to analyze the information you collect, either from existing sources or by generating it.
Analyse National Help Desk, good morning.
Good morning, my name is István Mag. We have pre-registered our products in 2008 and we're now trying to understand what we will need to do to register them under the REACH regulation. And I have quite a number of questions. I hope you will be able to help us.
Sure, it's good that you're taking the first steps towards the registration process, as it can take quite a long time. But may I ask you a few questions first?
Yes, of course.
Is the tonnage band of the substances that you manufacture or import between 1 and 100 tons per year?
For most of our substances, yes, it is, but in a few cases, it's just a few hundred kilos.
Okay, then you would need to register only those above 1 ton. And do you know the chemistry of your substances?
What exactly do you mean by chemistry?
Are they mainly simple or more complex, like reaction products, for example?
I think they are mainly simple substances, but this is something I will have to check with my chemist. I'm going to write it down.
I think now I have a better understanding of your situation. How can I help you further?
Well, the first thing is what we want to know is how can we get some help, as we're quite a small company and we have doubts that we'll be able to do everything on our own.
Well, you might have experts in your company and you can also check with other registrants for support. And you might also consider outsourcing part of the work. For example, consultancy companies can prepare your registration dossier, and crawl labs can provide you help with the testing and the analysis. And we also heard that industry associations can offer sector-specific advice and support.
Oh, that sounds very good. But what about consultants? Where can we find a good one? Would you have any advice on that?
Well, the first thing you should do is to check the ECHA website. There you can find a checklist for hiring a consultant. And then you should contact the consultant and test their competencies. And also be prepared to properly assess their answers. And industry associations can also provide you with a list of well-known consultants with good references.
Great, but how can we be absolutely sure that the consultant will be able to do all the work before the deadline in 2018?
Well, a consultant should tell you their capacity, both in terms of providing advice and support and carrying out the work. And you need to check that they can carry all the tasks that you are not able to do in the house. And also make sure to check with them their time availability in order to complete the tasks. And don't forget that the ECHA 2018 roadmap can help you define what is needed to be done.
Oh, thank you so much. That was very helpful.
You're welcome. Bye.
Goodbye.
A REACH help desk is established in every member state. They provide answers to your questions in your national language. The ECHA help desk can be contacted especially for questions on submissions and ECHA's scientific IT tools. You may also contact industry organization for sector-specific advice. And certainly talk to your co-registrants, the CEF members. Go into your REACH IT account to find the companies that pre-register the same substance as you and contact them. Do not reinvent the wheel. They may be experienced already with REACH. And of course, also our website and webinars are here to advise you.
Hi, so I called our national help desk and they told us that we'll have to gather some more information before we get to a consultant.
What sort of information?
Well, first of all, we'll need to determine what information we already have in-house on our substances and also to see if there are any other registrants planning to register the same substance.
Okay, but at least for two of our substances, Helsinki phenol and ECHA aldehyde, we are alone. I think we should start with those two. We will need a consultant later on anyway.
You're right. Have you read the document I sent you? It is the practical guide for SME managers and REACH coordinators. It was very useful to help us preparing the registration dossier.
I have read it, yes, I have it here, and I must say it's quite easy to understand, even for me, with little knowledge when it comes to REACH. If I understand correctly, the requirements are not the same when it comes to Helsinki phenol, which we produce 4.5 tons per year, and Eka aldehyde, which we produce 33 tons per year.
Did you notice that in the practical guide it said that we will also need to provide information on where our substances are used? So I think we will need to gather market information from our end users.
I think the advice was to see whether our customer sectors have already done this for us. Apparently there is an ECHA webpage where we can check if they are available. They call them user maps, I think. And then we need to prepare this chemical safety report based on the information.
Yes, but we only need to write a chemical safety report for aldehyde as to demonstrate that every use is safe, because we are producing that above 10 tons a year.
All right. Well, let's make a list of requirements for our consultant, shall we?
Yes.
To gather data for registering your substance, you need to follow these 4 steps. Collect all available information. Consider information requirements. Identify what you are missing and generate new information. Agree with your co-registrants how to divide the work. Remember that to achieve good quality information, you need to be clear from the beginning on what the substance identification of your chemical is and what is the proper name as set out in the ECHA guidance for substance identification and naming. We have prepared a practical guide for SME managers and REACH coordinators. It explains each of the information requirement in a few pages, indicating also what expertise is needed to assess and compile the data. This should help you to make a decision if you need to outsource certain parts of this work. And this guide will be available in 23 EU languages on our website. A good source of information on typical uses and conditions of use are the sector-specific use maps, which you will be able to access gradually from autumn 2016 onwards from our website. You should also check the data you have available in your company and contact your customers to find out how they are using the substance. Consider outsourcing the work if needed. You are responsible for your registration dossier, so do not wait for someone to do it for you. Follow the work of the consultant and the lead registrant, and remember that jointly submitting the registration is a shared responsibility.
Good morning. We would like to register 2 substances as lead registrant under REACH, and will require external support to put our registration dossiers together. We would like to discuss whether you can take our project on board.
Well, I'm quite busy, but let's see what kind of help you would need. To start with, I need to know the number and composition of the substance you want to register, then your tonnage band to determine which information you will need to submit, how many registrants are part of the joint submission, and also what information you can gather already within your own company.
Our substances are specialty substances and we want to protect our exact compositions. Is it enough to tell you the type of substance?
I'm afraid you will need to tell me the composition, but in our contract it will be stated that I won't share the exact compositions with the other companies.
Okay, we have one substance below 10 tons a year and another one above. What information should we gather in our company?
You need information on many properties like PhysChem results, possible impact on the environment, and also human health data. For the substance above 10 tons, you also need detailed information on conditions of use for all users you will cover in the chemical safety assessment. I can go through these with you and develop your inventory of information. If additional tests are required, you need to book them as soon as possible, because for some of them there is very low capacity left in the contract labs.
Okay, understood. We don't yet have the inventory of all information available, but we just found the practical guide for SME managers from the ECHA website, which describes all of these.
Well, yes, that's a very good start. Then for certain endpoints you need to go a bit deeper in reading. There are more precise guidance documents available.
I searched in the chemicals database on ECHA's website and I found plenty of data. Can we use them in our dossiers?
Well, did you notice the legal disclaimer? You can't just copy that data, you can only use it if you have the permission from the data owner.
Right, okay. But another question. I already know that we will need a 28-day study. Can we do it in January 2018? We will only have the money back then.
That will be too late if you want to submit in March 2018 as a lead. The sooner you start, the better for you and the better for your co-registrants.
I see. What about using alternative approaches to get the data? In this ECHA guide for SME managers, it said something about QSARs and read acrosses. They sound complicated but interesting enough if we can avoid any tests performed.
Well, this is what we need to do together if we now agree to set up a contract. Alternative approaches are very substance specific and their use depends on the available data.
Okay, I see. Well, that sounds good. As we were saying, we would need you to help us develop an inventory of what information we already have and what are the data gaps depending on our substances, tonnages and properties.
Great. Based on our discussions, I can prepare the contract for our cooperation and I can make a plan for filling any data gaps and a reasonable timeline to ensure the dossiers are ready before March 2018.
Be prepared, understand REACH, and know what your information requirements are. Always have in mind that animal tests should be avoided whenever possible. REACH promotes data sharing and adaptations, but the protection of human health and the environment is always first. This is why adaptations need to be justified before ECHA can accept them. REACH defines the rules to use adaptations. There are specific rules, which are specific for each endpoint or property, and are listed in column 2 of REACH Annexes 7 to 10. The general rules are not specific for a certain property, but can be used to adapt any information requirement. You can use adaptations when you can demonstrate that there is no significant exposure to your substance, or when testing is not scientifically possible. New testing on animals may also be scientifically not necessary if you can obtain suitable data using existing data and alternative approaches. To better promote the use of alternatives and the principles of animal testing as a last resort, we are publishing a practical guide on how to use alternatives to animal testing to fulfill your information requirements for REACH registration. We trust that this will help you to make the best use of the opportunities that REACH offers and will provide a good support for your business decisions.
Alright, let's talk about Helsinki phenol, the substance that we have 1 to 10 tons per year.
We have gathered our internal information available in-house, including analytical data, boiling point, water solubility, and flammability. We have the overview of uses and exposure, but we haven't asked our customers about all their end uses yet.
Good. So I see it's a well-defined monoconstituent substance. To identify which information is missing, we need to do some literature search, consider computer models, and data from similar substances. I can start with that. In the meantime, you should request any existing data from companies who have pre-registered a similar substance.
By the way, I was just contacted last week by another company, so we will now start a discussion with them to see if we can use their data and if we can become the lead registrant.
So we really need to do all these steps first before we can decide to generate new data and to contact the lab to carry out any missing tests.
Last time, by the way, you mentioned that these QSAR models are substance specific. I guess that now we could actually consider using them. So what about for tests like surface tension, vapor pressure, or acute toxicity?
Yeah, well, yes, there are valid models for these 3 tests.
But wait a minute, in the guide for SMEs, I read that for surface tension, there is no reliable QSAR.
Okay, I haven't noticed that before. In any case, for the 2 other tests, the models always have to be used together with other sources of information. This way we can show that the information covers the same aspects as the normal tests. This is called adaptation to the requirement and always requires some consideration by a technical expert.
So we just need to perform the test if it is quicker and cheaper. You told us that we're late anyway.
I did, but at the same time, you as registrants have to always consider other approaches first before doing testing on animals. Animal tests should only be done as a last resort, and this is what we are assessing here. As I was saying, we could also consider information on similar substances and build a scientific argumentation. There's information on this in Eka's guide on how to use alternatives. But I think we can now start to implement the strategy we discussed so far. Is there anything else you would like to discuss?
For a standard registration in the 1 to 10 tons per year, you need to fulfill the information requirements as set in REACH Annex 7. You need a set of physicochemical information and some toxicological and ecotoxicological information. This list of information requirements shown here is also available on our website. You can see that for a standard registration in the 1 to 10 tons per year band, you will normally need one test on vertebrate animals. Since under REACH, performing tests on animals is the last resort, alternative methods need to be considered first, and you will have to show that you have done that. To understand more about the computer models that can be used to predict the properties of chemical substances, we recommend you to have a look at the practical guide on how to use and report the quantitative structure-activity relationships, so-called QSARs.
Okay, time to check how we are progressing. How far are we with our dossier for eka-aldehyde? Time is going so fast.
For eka-aldehyde, we need to collect more data as we are above 10 tons a year. We also still need to collect information on uses from our downstream users and are thinking about using the sector use maps.
Yeah, and we need to discuss the results of the in vitro tests for skin and eye irritation.
Yes? Is there a problem?
Well, not really a problem as such. The results show that the substance is an irritant, but they allow us to classify accordingly, as required by REACH. The positive side is that we do not need to do any more tests on animals.
But what about this test called Screening Reproductive and Developmental Toxicity Study to see the effects on the next generations? We have no other alternative but to do that test, do we?
Here we will have a problem with timing. To find a time slot is quite... Excuse me, do you mind if I respond? Good morning, this is John speaking. How can I help you? Yes, sure, we can help you find a contract lab. Sorry? I don't think I heard that correctly. Did you say you need to start testing today? For a screening study? No, the first available time slot is in 3 months, I'm afraid. Yeah, that's right. The availability is getting low. My apologies, I'm with a customer right now. I will call you later. Bye. Well, as you can see, we are already running late. So where were we? Oh yes, be aware that for tests like this, if the results show that there are severe harmful effects, we may need to do more tests.
More animal testing? But if they are not listed for our tonnage, surely we don't need to do them.
Yes, but if the results are not sufficient or inconclusive, you need to consider performing further animal tests, which are normally required for substances in higher volumes. Anyway, before conducting such a test, you first need to submit a testing proposal to ECHA and wait for them to approve it. Only after that, you and the co-registrants can actually go ahead with performing the test.
But if the labs are occupied, it will take ages. Can we continue selling our eka-aldehyde before we get all these results?
Well, this is why we are hurrying to find the best solutions for you. Remember, we still have to look if we find data on similar substances. That way I can try to build a read-across case. ECHA has published quite a lot of advice on how to do this and even on how they check them. This is really not an easy road because we need to demonstrate that the substances are truly similar and would have similar effects in humans and the environment.
Okay, well, we'll let you evaluate the best scientific option for our substance. We can review it a bit later. And don't forget to let us know what other information you need for the dossier preparation. By the way, for users, we have contacted the 3 associations that are relevant to see if they can provide any necessary information.
Great. then we should have everything covered. So I'll see you in 2 weeks. We should try to be as thorough as possible at this stage, because a good quality dossier is less likely to require extra data if ECHA picks it up at a later stage.
For a standard registration in the 10 to 100 tons per year band, you will need to provide still more ecotoxicological and toxicological information on the substance, in addition to the information which are needed for a registration in the 1 to 10 tons per year band. After collecting all the information, the last activity is to assess the risk of the substance from the hazard and the exposure. If you find that the risk exceeds the safe limits, you need to implement risk management measures and define the conditions of use so it becomes safe, and recalculate your risk. If you manufacture or import your substance in amounts of 10 tons or more per year, you will need to document your chemical safety assessment in a chemical safety report, or so-called CSR. If your substance is classified, your CSR needs to include an exposure assessment and exposure scenarios describing the conditions of safe use. To help you carry out your chemical safety assessment and prepare your chemical safety report, ECHA has developed an application called CSR, which is available free of charge from the ECHA website. We have now summarized all the steps to be taken to assess the hazards and risks of your chemicals. As a take-home messages, let me reinforce the importance of understanding your information requirements so you can build a complete and compliant dossier. Remember that completeness is checked by ECHA when you submit before a registration is assigned to you. So if you submit an incomplete dossier, you are putting your timely registration at risk. If your substance has already been registered and you will be a member of a joint submission, it's still important to understand your information requirements so that you understand what you will be joining, and you can make sure that you do not pay for data that you don't need for your tonnage band. If you find the data is missing for your registration, remember that you need to agree in the CIF on how to generate the information. Have in mind that animal testing shall be the last resort. Carefully consider the hazard information you gather or generate in the CIF and your exposure information. Some of this information may be new to you, and you may have to rethink the risk management measures you have in place. You may also need to update your safety data sheets. Your main aim is to make sure that you and your customers use the substance safely.